For the better part of a century, Boeing wasn't just a company that made airplanes. It was this incredible symbol of American ingenuity, a real titan of industry, and honestly, the absolute gold standard for safety and engineering.
And that phrase, "if it's not Boeing, I'm not going," that wasn't some clever marketing slogan. No way. That was a genuine belief that people all over the world had. It was shorthand for trust, for quality, for safety. But in the last few years, that reputation has been, well, it's been shattered.
So yeah, what did happen? I mean, how does a company go from being the most trusted name in the sky to, frankly, a symbol of corporate crisis? This story is absolutely fascinating, and it's a huge cautionary tale about culture, compromise, and consequence.
The headlines have just been relentless, right? We're talking about the tragic loss of 346 lives in 2 separate crashes, the longest aircraft grounding in aviation history, that terrifying mid-air blowout on a practically brand new plane, and a financial hole so deep it's in the tens of billions. Look, this is way more than just a rough patch. We're talking about a systemic breakdown.
To really get what went wrong, you first have to understand just how high they flew. Boeing's legacy, its entire DNA, was built by engineers for engineers. It all started with the bombers that basically defined World War II, and then, in this brilliant move, they pivoted and practically invented the modern world of commercial air travel as we know it.
And this timeline, wow, it really shows you their incredible run. The B-17 was the workhorse of the war. The 707, it made flying across the Atlantic an everyday thing. The 737 became the backbone of pretty much all domestic travel. The iconic 747, the jumbo jet, made it so regular people could travel internationally. And the 777 was just this marvel of digital design. For decades, they weren't just building planes. They were literally building the future.
So where did the wheels start to come off? Well, a lot of people point to one single moment, this critical inflection point in Boeing's story. It all goes back to a huge corporate decision in 1997, when they bought their struggling rival, McDonnell Douglas.
Okay, this is where things get really fascinating, because this slide shows you a huge paradox. On paper, Boeing bought McDonnell Douglas, but what actually happened was that the finance-driven, cost-cutting culture of the company they bought, well, it started to conquer them. The focus shifted from taking big, bold engineering risks in Seattle to just managing financial targets from a new corporate headquarters in Chicago, far, far away from the factory floor.
And you can see this change plain as day right in the leadership. You go from these absolute titans like Bill Allen, a guy who literally bet the entire company on the 747, to executives from the McDonnell Douglas and GE way of thinking. I mean, you had leaders like Harry Stonecipher who literally said out loud that his goal was to stop running Boeing like a great engineering firm and start running it like a business.
And, well, that new philosophy, it had massive consequences. It started to prioritize short-term financial wins and shareholder returns over the really expensive, really risky, long-term process of designing brand new airplanes from scratch. And that path led directly to the 737 MAX.
Just get a load of this number, $60 billion. In just 6 years, Boeing spent enough money on stock buybacks and dividends to have funded 2 completely new airplanes from the ground up. So when their rival Airbus came out with a more fuel-efficient plane, Boeing was caught flat-footed. Why? Because the money for a new plane, it was gone.
So that basically backed them into a corner. And what do? They compromised. Instead of innovating, they took a shortcut. They decided to just bolt these newer, bigger, more efficient engines onto an airframe that was designed back in the 1960s. It was definitely a faster and cheaper solution, but it created a fundamental and dangerous aerodynamic problem.
So how do you fix a hardware problem? Well, their answer was a piece of software called MCAS. It was supposed to make the new plane fly just like the old one, but it had 2 just catastrophic flaws. First, it relied on a single sensor that was known to fail. And second, and this is a big one, they pretty much hid its existence from the pilots, all to save airlines money on retraining.
And this is where the story stops being about a corporate case study and turns into an absolute human tragedy. All of those cultural shifts, those financial decisions, those engineering compromises, they had a devastating, real-world cost. 346. That's not just a number. That's 346 people. Fathers, mothers, children, crew members who got on Lion Air and Ethiopian Airlines flights and never came home. That number represents the ultimate, tragic price of the failures that had been building up inside Boeing for 2 decades.
The fallout, as you can imagine, was just immediate and catastrophic. A 20-month global grounding, tens of billions of dollars in losses, and a complete crisis of trust with regulators. And just when you thought maybe, just maybe, they were turning a corner, bam, the Alaska Airlines door plug blows out. That proved this wasn't just a design flaw anymore. The problem was deep on the factory floor. That culture of production over quality had infected the whole company.
So, that brings us to right now. Boeing is trying to pull off one of the most difficult turnarounds in corporate history. They're trying to rebuild not just their production lines, but the very soul of the company.
So, the new leadership under Kelly Ortberg seems to be taking some pretty concrete steps. Moving the CEO back to Seattle, closer to the engineers, that's a huge symbolic move, right? Adopting a new fix-first, produce-later philosophy is a direct reversal of the old way of thinking. And bringing a key supplier back under their own roof is a big move to try and get control over quality again. These are the first steps on what's going to be a very, very long road. In this table here, it really shows you the bizarre situation Boeing is in today. On one hand, they're in a really fragile spot. They've got massive debt and Airbus is winning on market share. But on the other hand, they're structurally solid as a rock. They have a record order backlog and they're absolutely essential to national defense. That means Boeing has the money and, maybe more importantly, the time to try and actually fix itself.
So it all comes back to where we started, doesn't it? The real problem at Boeing wasn't a bad sensor or some missing bolts. It was a broken culture. And that leaves us with the most critical question of all. Once a company loses that engineering-first soul in the chase for financial numbers, can you ever really get it back? The future of a global duopoly and the safety of millions of us who fly really depends on the answer.